found in his phone a folder called Evidence with 30 videos of our fights. In the originals he throws plates at me, but in the edited versions you only see me dodging and screaming stop. Everyone thinks I'm a monster. I discovered something that made my blood run cold and I honestly don't know what to do anymore. My whole world feels like it's been turned upside down and I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about my marriage. It started about 6 months ago when I noticed people around me acting weird. My sister stopped calling as much. My best friend since college started giving me these strange looks when we'd hang out. Even my mother-in-law, who used to be warm and welcoming, became distant and formal. At first I thought maybe I was being paranoid or too sensitive, but the change was so obvious that I couldn't ignore it anymore. The breaking point came last week when my sister finally confronted me. She said she was concerned about my behavior and asked if I was getting help for my anger issues. I was completely shocked because I've never considered myself an angry person. Sure, my husband and I have our disagreements like any couple, but I never thought of myself as someone with anger problems. When I pressed her for details, she reluctantly told me that my husband had been showing people videos of our arguments. She said he was worried about me and wanted advice on how to handle the situation. According to her, in these videos I was screaming, throwing things, and being completely unreasonable while he remained calm and tried to de-escalate. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. This description didn't match my memory of our fights at all. Yes, we argue, and yes, sometimes voices get raised, but I've never been the aggressor. If anything, I'm usually the one trying to calm things down when he gets worked up. That night, when my husband went to take a shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through his phone. I know it was wrong, but I had to understand what was happening. What I found made me physically sick. There was a folder labeled Evidence with 37 video files. 37. I had no idea he'd been recording our private moments for months. The files were organized with dates and brief descriptions. Some were labeled original and others were labeled edited or final version. I started watching the original files first and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. These were our actual fights, but seeing them from his perspective was eye-opening. In every single video, he was the one who escalated things. He would start by saying something hurtful or accusatory, then when I tried to defend myself or explain my side, he would get louder and more aggressive. In one video from 3 months ago, he accused me of flirting with the mailman because I had chatted with him about the weather. When I tried to explain that I was just being friendly, he started yelling about how I was naive and probably encouraging inappropriate behavior. The argument escalated when he grabbed my coffee mug and threw it across the kitchen, shattering it against the wall. I remember that day clearly because I cut my foot on a piece of ceramic while cleaning up. But then I watched the edited version of the same fight, and I understood why everyone thought I was the problem. The video started right after he threw the mug, showing only me standing there with pieces of ceramic around my feet, raising my voice and saying things like, "You can't keep doing this," and "This is insane." Without the context of what led up to that moment, it looked like I was having an unprovoked meltdown over broken dishes. Video after video showed the same pattern. He would provoke, escalate, sometimes throw things or slam doors, but the edited versions only showed my reactions. In one particularly awful video, he had thrown a dinner plate that barely missed my head. In the original, you could see him winding up and hurling it at me while I ducked and screamed for him to stop. But the edited version started right as I was ducking, making it look like I was dramatically overreacting to nothing. The most disturbing part was how calculated it all seemed. He had clearly been planning this for months, carefully positioning his phone to capture the best angles and editing the footage to tell a completely different story. Some of the edited videos had multiple cuts, removing his voice entirely while keeping mine, or cutting out the parts where he was being aggressive while keeping my defensive responses. I sat on our bathroom floor until 3 in the morning, watching video after video, trying to process what this meant for my marriage and my life. The man I had been living with for 4 years, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, had been systematically documenting and manipulating our private moments to make me look unstable. The worst part wasn't even the violation of privacy or the manipulation itself. It was realizing that he had been showing these fake versions to people I cared about for months. My family, my friends, probably his family too, all believed I was some kind of volatile person who couldn't control her temper. No wonder everyone had been treating me differently. I thought about confronting him immediately, but something held me back. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe some part of me knew that once I opened this door, there would be no going back. Instead, I quietly transferred all the videos to my own phone and tried to act normal the next morning. The following days were torture. Every interaction felt fake. When he kissed me goodbye before work, I wondered if he was planning our next evidence session. When we had normal conversations over dinner, I found myself analyzing every word, looking for signs of the manipulative person I now knew he was. I also started paying more attention to how he behaved during our disagreements. It was like seeing him clearly for the first time. He had this way of pushing my buttons until I reacted, then suddenly becoming calm and reasonable, as if my response was completely disproportionate to whatever minor thing had started the argument. A few days later, we had another fight about household chores. I noticed him subtly positioning his phone on the counter, angled toward where I was standing. The whole thing felt like a performance. He made increasingly ridiculous demands about how I loaded the dishwasher, getting more and more critical until I finally snapped and told him he was being unreasonable. As soon as I raised my voice, his whole demeanor changed. He became this picture of calm patience, speaking in measured tones while I stood there frustrated and confused by the sudden shift. Later that night, I checked his phone and sure enough, there was a new video file. The edited version made it look like I had exploded over him politely asking me to rinse the dishes better. That's when I realized this wasn't just about documenting our fights. He was actively orchestrating them, pushing me to react so he could capture it on video. Our entire relationship had become some kind of sick psychological experiment where I was the unwitting subject. I spent the next week in a strange fog, going through the motions of normal life while internally screaming. I kept thinking about all the people who now saw me as some kind of unstable person. My sister had probably told other family members. My friend had probably discussed it with her husband. His family definitely knew, which explained why recent gatherings had been so awkward. The isolation was the worst part. I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone because they all already had this twisted image of who I was. Even if I tried to explain what was really happening, would they believe me? Or would they think I was just making excuses for my behavior? I finally decided I had to do something when my husband casually mentioned that he thought I should consider anger management classes. He said it with such fake concern, suggesting that maybe talking to someone about my outbursts would help our relationship. The audacity of it made me feel sick. That night, I made copies of everything and started planning my next move. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't keep living this lie. Update 1. I can't believe how much support I've gotten from my last post. Reading all your comments helped me realize that I wasn't crazy and that what was happening to me was a form of abuse I didn't even have a name for. It gave me the courage to take action. I decided to start with my sister since she was the one who had been most direct about her concerns. I asked her to meet me for coffee and told her I had something important to show her. I was nervous because I wasn't sure if she would believe me or if she would think I was making excuses. When I showed her the original videos compared to the edited versions, her face went completely white. She watched several of them back to back, and I could see her anger building with each one. She kept saying, "Oh my God," and "I can't believe this," under her breath. When she got to the video where he threw the plate at my head, she actually started crying. She immediately apologized for believing the edited versions and for treating me differently. She said she had been so confused because the person in those videos didn't seem like the sister she knew, but she thought maybe marriage stress was bringing out a side of me she hadn't seen before. She felt terrible for not questioning it more. The most validating part was when she said that even in the edited videos, something had felt off to her. She said my reactions seemed disproportionate to what was shown, but she assumed there was context she wasn't seeing. She never imagined that the context was being deliberately removed to make me look bad. My sister wanted to call the police immediately, but I wasn't ready for that step yet. Instead, she helped me make a plan. We decided that I needed to secure all the evidence first and then gradually reach out to other people who had seen the fake videos. Over the next few days, I systematically contacted my closest friends and family members. The conversations were difficult because I had to admit that my husband had been recording our private moments, but everyone's reaction was the same shock and anger that my sister had shown. My best friend from college actually broke down when she saw the real videos. She said she had been so confused because she had known me for over 15 years and had never seen me be aggressive or unreasonable. She had been planning to distance herself from me because she was worried about my mental state, but something about the whole situation never felt right to her. The hardest conversation was with my mother-in-law. I debated whether to show her at all because I was afraid she wouldn't believe me or would take her son's side no matter what. But I decided she deserved to know the truth about what her son was doing. Her reaction surprised me. She watched the videos in complete silence, and when she finished, she just sat there for a long time without saying anything. Finally, she told me that this wasn't the first time her son had done something like this. Apparently, in high school, he had convinced his parents that his younger brother was bullying him by showing them edited recordings of their interactions. It had caused a huge rift in their family that took years to heal. She said she had hoped he had grown out of that behavior, but clearly he had just gotten more sophisticated about it. She apologized for believing the edited videos and promised to help me however she could. Having people in my corner made such a difference. For months I had felt like I was going crazy, questioning my own memory and wondering if maybe I really was the problem. But seeing other people's reactions to the truth validated everything I had been feeling. The hardest part was still living with him while I figured out my next steps. Every day felt like walking on eggshells, pretending everything was normal while knowing what he was capable of. He seemed pleased that I had been quieter lately, probably thinking his manipulation was working. I started documenting everything myself, keeping a detailed journal of our interactions and his behavior. I also set up my own hidden recording devices around our house because I realized that if this ever went to court, I would need my own evidence of his behavior. One night, he tried to start another manufactured fight about how I never contributed to household expenses, which was ridiculous because I paid for groceries and utilities every month. I could see him setting up his phone, so I made sure my own recording device was running. This time, instead of taking the bait, I stayed completely calm and spoke in a measured tone. It was fascinating to watch him get increasingly frustrated as I refused to react the way he wanted. He kept escalating, making more and more outrageous accusations, but I just calmly corrected his statements with facts. Eventually, he lost his temper completely and started yelling about how I was being condescending and impossible to talk to. When I checked my recording later, it was clear that he was the only one who had raised his voice or said anything inappropriate. I'm sure his edited version told a very different story, but now I had my own documentation of what really happened. I also started reaching out to a domestic violence organization for advice, even though I wasn't sure if what was happening to me qualified as domestic violence. The counselor I spoke with assured me that psychological manipulation and isolation tactics definitely counted as abuse, and she helped me understand that what I was experiencing had a name: coercive control. She explained that abusers often use documentation as a weapon, either by threatening to show embarrassing or compromising materials to others, or by creating false evidence like my husband was doing. She said the level of planning and manipulation involved in what he was doing was actually quite serious and could potentially be considered criminal depending on local laws. This conversation helped me realize that what was happening wasn't just a relationship problem that could be solved with better communication. This was deliberate, calculated abuse designed to isolate me and make me question my own reality. I started making concrete plans to leave. I opened my own bank account and began transferring money slowly so he wouldn't notice. I researched apartments in areas where he wouldn't think to look for me. I made copies of all important documents and stored them somewhere safe. The hardest part was accepting that the man I had married either never existed or had changed into someone completely different. Looking back, I could see signs of this behavior earlier in our relationship, but he had been more subtle about it then. The video recording was just the latest and most sophisticated version of tactics he had been using for years. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, but the counselor helped me understand that this kind of manipulation is designed to be invisible to the victim. Abusers are skilled at making their behavior seem normal or justified, and they're experts at making their victims feel like they're the problem. Update 2. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and so much has happened. I finally found the courage to leave, and I'm writing this from my new apartment. I'm safe, but the process of getting here was more complicated than I expected. After I posted my last update, several people messaged me with advice about legal options. I decided to consult with an attorney who specialized in domestic abuse cases. She reviewed all the videos and documentation I had gathered and told me that what my husband was doing could potentially be prosecuted as harassment, invasion of privacy, and possibly even stalking depending on how the evidence was used. More importantly for my immediate situation, she said the videos could be crucial evidence in divorce proceedings, especially if he tried to claim that I was mentally unstable or abusive. She advised me to gather as much evidence as possible before leaving, since I might not get another chance to access his devices. That weekend, while my husband was visiting his parents, I went through his computer and found even more disturbing material. He had been keeping detailed notes about my daily activities, my mood changes, even my menstrual cycle. He had documented every argument we'd had for over 2 years, but his notes bore no resemblance to what had actually happened. According to his version, I was constantly starting fights, breaking things, and having emotional breakdowns. Even worse, I found evidence that he had been sharing these fake videos in his distorted notes with his friends from work. There was an entire group chat where they discussed crazy wife stories, and my husband was a regular contributor. Reading those messages made me feel physically sick. These men were laughing about situations where I had been genuinely scared or upset, but they only saw the manipulated version where I looked unstable. I also discovered that he had been researching how to get me committed for mental health evaluation. He had bookmarked articles about involuntary psychiatric holds and had been documenting what he called episodes that were actually just normal human emotions like frustration or sadness. Finding this information was the final push I needed to get out immediately. I realized that his plan wasn't just to isolate me socially or make me question myself. He was building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent. The thought of being trapped in a psychiatric facility because of his lies was terrifying enough to overcome my fear of leaving. I spent the next few days quietly moving my most important belongings out of the house while he was at work. I had already secured an apartment across town and had been slowly transferring money to my own account. My sister helped me coordinate everything so I could get out in one day without him knowing what was happening. The day I left, I waited until he went to work. Then my sister and 2 of her friends came over with a moving truck. We had everything packed and loaded within 4 hours. I left a note explaining that I knew about the videos and that I would be filing for divorce. I also left copies of some of the original videos so he would know that I had evidence of what he had really been doing. I stayed at my sister's house for the first few nights because I was afraid he might try to find my new apartment. My instincts were right because he showed up at her house that same evening, demanding to know where I was. My sister told him I wasn't there and that he needed to communicate through attorneys from now on. The next few days were scary because he kept calling and texting, alternating between apologizing and threatening. In some messages, he claimed the videos were just meant to help us work through our communication problems. In others, he said I was mentally unstable and that leaving proved I needed professional help. He even threatened to show the edited videos to my employer to prove I was unfit for my job. That threat was what made me decide to go to the police. The officer I spoke with was initially skeptical, but when I showed her the original videos compared to the edited versions, her whole attitude changed. She said what he had done was definitely criminal and encouraged me to file charges. The legal process has been slow and complicated, but having all that documentation has made a huge difference. My attorney says we have one of the strongest cases of tech-enabled domestic abuse she's ever seen. The fact that he documented his own behavior so thoroughly is actually working in my favor. The hardest part has been dealing with the aftermath in my social circle. Even though I've shown the real videos to my close friends and family, there are still people who only saw the edited versions and don't know the truth. Some of his work friends and a few mutual acquaintances still think I'm the unstable one who abandoned my husband without warning. I've had to accept that some people will never know the real story, and that's okay. The people who matter most have seen the evidence and are supporting me. My sister has been incredible throughout this whole process, and my parents drove down from their state to help me get settled in my new place. The most surprising support came from my mother-in-law. She not only believed me immediately when I showed her the evidence, but she also revealed that her son had exhibited similar manipulative behavior as a teenager and young adult. She said she had always worried that he hadn't really changed, just gotten better at hiding his true nature. She actually testified on my behalf when we went to court for the restraining order. Having his own mother confirm that this was a pattern of behavior dating back years really strengthened my case. The judge granted a temporary restraining order and scheduled a hearing for a permanent one. My ex-husband's reaction to losing control has been revealing. Without me there to manipulate and gaslight, he's been lashing out at everyone around him. According to his mother, he's been calling family members trying to convince them that I've lost my mind and that I'm making everything up. But since several of them have now seen the real videos, his efforts are just making him look more unstable. He's also been trying to contact my friends and co-workers with his edited videos, but my attorney was able to get a cease and desist order that prohibits him from sharing any recordings of me without my consent. Violating that order would mean jail time, so hopefully that will stop him from trying to destroy my reputation further. Living alone again has been an adjustment, but mostly in good ways. I had forgotten what it felt like to relax in my own home without constantly analyzing every word and action. I can have a bad day or feel frustrated about something without wondering if it's being documented and used against me later. I'm still dealing with some anxiety and trust issues, but I'm working through them on my own for now. The domestic violence counselor I spoke with helped me understand that healing from this kind of psychological abuse takes time, and that it's normal to question myself even when I know the truth. The divorce proceedings are ongoing, but my attorney is optimistic. Having all that video evidence of his behavior, plus the documentation of his systematic manipulation, has made it clear that this marriage ended because of his abusive behavior, not because of any mental health issues on my part. I know I still have a long road ahead of me, both legally and emotionally. But for the first time in months, I feel like myself again. I'm not constantly second-guessing my reactions or wondering if I'm being unreasonable. I can trust my own perceptions and feelings without worrying that someone is recording them to use against me later. Final update. It's been 6 months since I left, and I wanted to give everyone a final update since so many of you have been following my story and offering support. The legal side of things has mostly been resolved. My ex-husband was charged with several crimes related to the secret recording and distribution of the videos. He eventually pled guilty to harassment and invasion of privacy charges in exchange for a plea deal that included mandatory anger management classes and a permanent restraining order. He also had to pay a significant fine and do community service. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. Because of all the evidence I had gathered, I was able to keep most of our shared assets, and he was ordered to pay for my legal fees. More importantly, the judge made it clear in the final decree that the marriage ended due to his abusive and manipulative behavior, which protects me if he ever tries to use the edited videos again in the future. The most satisfying part was that several of his work friends came forward after the legal proceedings became public record. Apparently, once word got out about what he had really been doing, some of them started questioning other stories he had told about previous relationships. One of his co-workers even reached out to apologize for laughing at those group chat messages without knowing the real context. His own family has mostly cut contact with him. It turns out that his pattern of manipulation and secret recording had affected more than just me. His younger brother came forward with stories about similar behavior during their childhood, and his parents finally connected the dots about several incidents that had never made sense before. The hardest part of this whole experience was rebuilding my confidence in my own judgment. For so long, I had been questioning whether my reactions and feelings were reasonable, constantly second-guessing myself because someone I trusted was telling me I was wrong about my own experiences. It took months before I stopped automatically analyzing my emotions and reactions, wondering if they were appropriate or if I was being too sensitive. Even now, sometimes I catch myself doing it, but I'm getting better at trusting my instincts again. I've been living in my own apartment for 6 months now, and it still amazes me how peaceful life can be when you're not constantly walking on eggshells. I can have a stressful day at work or get frustrated about traffic without worrying that someone is documenting it as evidence of mental instability. My relationship with my family and friends has completely healed. Once everyone understood what had really been happening, they were incredibly supportive and understanding. My sister jokes that she should have trusted her instincts more because she always felt like something was off about those videos, even though she couldn't put her finger on what it was. I've also reconnected with some friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. Looking back, I can see how my ex-husband had gradually isolated me from people who might have questioned his version of events or offered me perspective on what was happening. The experience has changed how I view relationships and trust. I'm more aware now of subtle signs of manipulation and control that I might have missed before. I've learned to pay attention when someone consistently makes me question my own perceptions or when their version of events doesn't match my memory of what happened. I'm not ready to date yet, and I'm not sure when I will be. Right now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my sense of self and figuring out who I am when I'm not constantly defending my actions and emotions to someone else. It's actually been incredibly liberating to rediscover parts of my personality that had gotten buried under years of manipulation. I've also been volunteering with the domestic violence organization that helped me understand what was happening to me. My story has been useful in helping other women recognize similar patterns of psychological abuse, especially the more subtle forms that don't involve physical violence. One thing I want to emphasize for anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation: trust your instincts. If people around you are suddenly treating you differently, if you're constantly questioning your own reactions and emotions, if someone in your life seems to have an unusual amount of evidence about your behavior, pay attention to those red flags. Also, if someone is secretly recording you, that's not normal relationship behavior, even if they claim it's to help with communication or to have a record of what was said. Healthy relationships are built on trust and open communication, not surveillance and documentation. The support I received from strangers on the internet was honestly life-changing. So many people shared similar experiences or offered practical advice that helped me navigate the situation. Reading about other people's experiences with psychological abuse helped me understand that what was happening to me had a name and that I wasn't alone. I'm doing well now. I have my own place, I'm reconnecting with hobbies and interests that I had neglected, and I'm rebuilding relationships with people who actually know and support the real me. Some days are still hard, and I'm still working through some trust issues, but overall I feel more like myself than I have in years. For anyone who's been following this story from the beginning, thank you for your support and encouragement. Knowing that strangers on the internet believed me and validated my experience gave me strength when I needed it most. I hope my story helps someone else recognize the signs of this kind of abuse and find the courage to get out before it gets even worse. The most important thing I've learned is that you don't have to be physically hurt to be in an abusive relationship. Psychological manipulation, gaslighting, and systematic efforts to isolate you from support systems are just as damaging as physical violence. Don't let anyone tell you that it's not real abuse just because there are no visible bruises. I'm finally free, and I'm never going back to that kind of situation again. Life is too short to spend it constantly defending your right to have feelings and reactions like a normal human being.